Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at tonight.
And grave dog. Any one of y'all vote for this crap.
Emotions run high at City Council as Alder people vote to spend $51 million to care for migrants sent to Chicago.
Great 78 was sent here to do the work.
Brokering a budget deal, bipartisanship, and ethics. One-on-one with Illinois' House Speaker.
And I go for a little ride-along on the Chicago NASCAR street course.
And now to our top story tonight. Tensions flare today as City Hall as Alder people weighed a $51 million plan to help care for migrants sent to Chicago from Texas. The measure passed City Council 34-13. But the vote came after an intense 90-minute debate that saw tension between Black and Latino Chicagoans. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us outside City Hall now with more. Heather, what will the city use this $51 million for?
Well, Brandis, this $51 million will be used to feed and shelter the nearly 4,000 migrants now housed in city shelters. In addition, it will help move the nearly 500 migrants living in police stations across the city into more permanent housing or at least temporary shelters.
So Alderman David Moore was one of 7 Black Alder people to vote against the funding, echoing the complaints of dozens of Black Chicagoans who packed the meeting to oppose the plan because of decades of disinvestment on the south and west sides. Let's take a listen.
I'm reminded when the flight attendant says on the plane, in an emergency, make sure you put your mask on first before you help someone else. And so we have to put our mask on first, and we have to help the residents of this great city.
Heather, who else voted against this funding and why?
Well, 6 white and conservative aldermen joined Alderman David Moore in voting against this funding. Some of them said that it just didn't make any sense to spend $51 million that will only cover the city through the end of June, with more migrants arriving every day. They want a long-term comprehensive plan, and Mayor Brandon Johnson said today after the city council meeting he is still working on it.
So despite sharing some of Alderman Moore's concerns, Alderwoman Maria Hadden reached the opposite conclusion.
A conflict is being created at a weak point in our city. And it's frustrating because this weak point wouldn't exist if our city hadn't spent decades not serving Black residents. And also, I do care about the new arrivals. And I do care about what happens to them. And we can't have people sleeping on the floors of police stations.
Heather, it was an emotional day at City Hall. What role did the crowd play in today's meeting? The public?
Well, you could hear a little bit of the crowd in the background while Alderman Hadden was speaking. They played a huge role. They booed, they cheered, they hissed. Several times people had to be admonished to quiet down, and several people were removed from the chambers. But perhaps the most startling moments were when 2 Alder people, Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez was told to go back to his own country, and Alderman Jeanette Taylor was called a traitor and a sellout. Alderwoman Taylor voted for the funding, but not before delivering a really tearful and emotional speech about how difficult this issue is and just how fraught these issues are for Black Chicagoans and Latino Chicagoans.
Heather, meanwhile, what's next for the nearly 500 people sleeping on the floors of police stations in Chicago?
Well, this money will help the city get them into temporary shelters, but as I said before, there's still no long-term plan to sort of help these people and make sure that they have enough to eat, that they have clothes, and that they're getting the medical care that they need. Many arrived here with not much more than the clothes on their back, which is why city officials say this humanitarian crisis is very much ongoing.
Thank you, Heather. And of course, we'll talk about this more later with you in Spotlight Politics. And you can read Heather's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news.
Now to some more of today's top stories. Former Vice President Mike Pence is expected to launch his campaign for president soon. Multiple reports cite sources that say he'll be launching his campaign a week from today in Iowa. Pence will join a growing field of candidates vying for the Republican nomination and going up against Donald Trump, his former boss. Pence testified before a federal grand jury last month investigating efforts by Trump and his allies to overturn the results of the 2020 election.
Outdoor dining in Chicago is here to stay. The City Council unanimously passes a measure to make permanent the outdoor dining rules that were originally designed to help restaurants stay afloat amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The measure allows restaurants to serve customers in expanded sidewalk cafes and nearby curb lanes and parking lots with the local alderperson's approval. It also allows street closures for outdoor dining if 3 or more eateries join forces. Bars can also apply for a permit if they partner up with a restaurant to feed patrons.
A Michigan man who held illegal charter boat rides along Lake Michigan and the Chicago River is sentenced to 1 year in federal prison. Authorities say 37-year-old Christopher Mike Garbowski ran unlicensed commercial charter voyages from 2017 to 2019 on his 40-foot powerboat known as Seahawk and Anchorman. Federal prosecutors say that he lied to Coast Guard officials on multiple occasions and also occasionally asked passengers to lie to officials. Garbowski's sentence comes after he pleaded guilty earlier this year to a felony charge for violating a Coast Guard's order.
Temperatures hit 90 degrees for the first time this year. And with that, city officials are reminding people of new air conditioning requirements. Landlords must provide AC in all apartments or have an air-conditioned common space when the heat index is 80 degrees. This applies to buildings over 80 feet in height, or if it has more than 100 apartment units, or operates as housing for older persons under the Federal Fair Housing Act. People can call 311 if their home is dangerously hot to request a senior well-being check or to find the nearest cooling center.
In a bit, I'm going to take a spin around the city's NASCAR track with some legends, Dale Jarrett and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Look for that.
I'm looking for that. But first, Amanda Vinicky and the Speaker of the Illinois House on the new state budget right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Illinois could soon see changes, 565 of them to be precise. That's how many bills state lawmakers passed in the spring session, which adjourned at about 3 a.m. early Saturday. Joining us now to talk about what some of those measures would do and what the General Assembly didn't get to is one of the powerful legislators who calls the shots during session, Speaker of the Illinois House, Chris Welch. Thanks so much for joining us, Speaker. Quick note that neither of the Republican leaders of the General Assembly were able to join us this evening, but we are working to get them on the program for next week. So let's get right to it. The budget did pass. You have, as you alluded to earlier, a supermajority, historic, of 78 Democratic members. Still, there were some hiccups, and a main point of contention was over how much to spend on health care for undocumented residents. The budget relies on Governor J.B. Pritzker slicing spending by $500 million. Can he actually reduce spending by that much, and how?
Well, let me first say, Amanda, thank you for having me on the show. We passed a fiscally responsible and compassionate budget. This is a budget that's going to take care of people all over this state. And there's also a program called Healthy Benefits for Immigrant Adults. These are folks that are here, they're working, they're paying taxes. If they were sick without this program, they would go get health care in emergency rooms. It would cost us all a lot more money if they were receiving their health care via emergency rooms. So there's a program that's Medicaid eligible that they are allowed to get health care through, and that's the health.
How can it be cut by that much, though? That's huge.
Well, there's
about half.
There's a number of things that they do that are eligible for federal match, and the governor, through the tools that we provided him, will be allowed to contain the growth of the program.
So you're confident it'll be contained by that much, that great?
We're very confident that we gave the governor the tools that he needs to manage the program.
You know, meanwhile, we just heard about this city council battle over spending on migrants and asylum seekers. The state budget puts about $42 million to give Chicago and other communities to help in efforts with asylum seekers, but really that could be considered a drop in the bucket. What is the state's responsibility here?
Well, you know, in 2017, Representative Welch passed a law called the Trust Act. The Trust Act made Illinois the most welcoming state in the country. We are a welcoming state. Chicago is a welcoming city. And you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And, you know, we believe in helping people.
So why not more then?
Well, I mean, we also have to do it in a fiscally responsible way. We do have a whole host of things that we have to balance. And I think this was the right way of going about it. We're not ignoring the new arrivals. We're actually being consistent with our values and welcoming them to this great state. Hopefully they'll stay. You know, we're looking forward to being a partner in this endeavor in the years to come.
The budget does a lot, and we have covered some of that, but one of the elements that it does do is give you and other legislators pay raises so that the base pay for a member of the General Assembly will be nearly $90,000. I'm told that that has prompted not just negative feedback, but even death threats from constituents. Explain, why is a 5.5% raise deserved?
Well, you may recall that I was part of a lawsuit years ago when former Governor Bruce Rauner attempted to stop our pay, and the courts ruled in favor of the legislature. He could not stop our pay. There were other lawsuits regarding our COLA, and judges have ruled that we cannot waive our COLA. It's unconstitutional. And so what you're hearing every year from the other side is a political argument that they know courts have already ruled.
Doesn't this go beyond a COLA, though? 5.5%?
This is a COLA, and a raise is different from the COLA, and we cannot waive the COLA. Courts have ruled that. And so I know that the Republicans are trying to make it out to more than what it is, but our lawyers have advised that everything we've done is proper.
Have you received death threats?
I have not.
Good. Now, speaking of Republicans, Senate Republicans say that they were part of budget negotiations, but that is not so according to your counterpart in the House, and that is Minority Leader Tony McCombie. Let's give a listen here.
Regardless of our weekly meetings, Speaker Welch, you gave a false hope for a new day. The House Republicans were denied participation in many things, but most importantly, this year's budget process.
Is this a case of to the victor go the spoils, or can you give an example of something in the budget that was contributed via GOP input?
Well, first of all, let me say that that's not a truthful statement. She was performing for her caucus, performing for folks back home in her district. The reality is, I met with her weekly since the beginning of session. And we also had Republicans as a part of our working group process. The budget was being worked on in a very bipartisan way. About 2 weeks ago in one of our weekly meetings, I asked the leader if Republicans were actually going to put a vote on the budget. And I actually specifically said, can you at least allow your leadership team to vote on the budget? After that, sometimes meetings that were twice, thrice a week ended. She never got back to me in response to my question. The first time that I found out that they were going to vote against the budget was when they voted against the budget. And so we were very direct in what we were trying to do. We were working with them. They were a part of our processes. But when I actually asked her to commit to putting Republicans on the budget, all communication stopped on her part.
We'll be sure if we do get Republicans.
But this is a budget that helps the entire state. Every university in this state is in a Republican district. Universities receive 7% increases across the board. The DSPs,
well, scholarship funding increasing, there's a lot
$100 million
to it.
more in MAP, AIM high scholarships, across the board.
It's a merit-based one.
Absolutely.
I know we're about out of time. I want to get one more just quick yes or no question. Does Illinois need a constitutional amendment codifying the right to an abortion? It's something that could be on the 2024 ballot, yes or no?
I certainly think it's something we should look at.
All right, I'm afraid that is all we have time for right now, but we appreciate your being here, and we'll do our best to get to the bottom of Republicans' input should they join us next week. Thanks again to House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch.
Thank you.
And up next, Paris Schutz test drives NASCAR's Summer Out. Stay with us.
The street closures are coming. The parking restrictions start this weekend. All signs point to the kickoff of Chicago's NASCAR street race. It's the first ever street course for the 75-year-old racing institution. And today, NASCAR legends Dale Jarrett and Dale Earnhardt Jr. gave me a spin around the specially designed track that weaves in and out of Grant Park and provides some iconic views for spectators. You're looking at a neat little simulation that NASCAR provided. So we didn't exactly drive a stock car, rather we got into a giant Cadillac SUV, and there weren't other racers on the course, but Chicago traffic did give us a simulation of what this might feel like as we pulled out from Buckingham Fountain.
This is going to be like a crash course for them in certain terms. We don't want it to be a crash fest by any means, but so when I say a crash course is that they're going to have to learn this very quickly. There's limited amount of actual on-time track practice, and so the driver's trying to figure out where are your best places to maximize your speed, and then not only to maximize your speed, but where are going to be my passing opportunities.
So this is kind of a stretch here.
Yes, it is.
You can make your move.
Yeah, probably the highest speed part of the track, upwards of 140 miles an hour through here. But as I've discussed with others, at every wide part of the track comes a narrow part at the end of that, and the drivers are going to have to figure out exactly how much they can push the limit to try to make that pass or to make that outbrake someone getting into the right-hand corner that we're going to have at the end of this straightaway. So we're coming down from 140 miles an hour down to a hard right-hand corner, even though right now we will be on that side making the corner, right. So there's a little more room, but this has all been laid out and made so that there's better for the drivers and for putting on a good race. So a lot of has gone into that. But I look at that, how much braking am I going to need? How much is that going to upset the car? And actually looking at, what parts of this are paved and newly formed asphalt for here, because there's more grip in that part of the racetrack. There's a lot of sights to see around here. I'm sure the first few laps around here, the drivers are going to be a little bit distracted because you're not used to seeing things like this.
What's the mentality of the driver going into this when they've never been on this course and they've never raced a street course before?
Every driver's going to be different. Some will be excited about a new challenge. Some will be maybe miserable out of the gate, not sure whether this is going to be something they'll enjoy. So the ones with a great attitude will probably have the best success in the race. The ones that come in pessimistic or expecting the worst, I suppose, expecting to struggle, will likely struggle.
NASCAR officials say they're already expecting 100,000 spectators downtown to witness this historic event July 1st and 2nd. It won't come cheap, however. Tickets start at $269 for general admission, $353 for enhanced general admission, and $465 for premium seats for the weekend, which will also include a festival and concerts. I guess it is cheaper than Taylor Swift tickets at Soldier Field, so there is that. Of course, this race has not been without its controversy. Former Mayor Lori Lightfoot struck the deal before City Council had a chance to weigh in. Groups like Friends of the Parks have a few concerns about how this will all go.
Park access, safety, noise pollution, and the fact that this is but one of many events that is really going to close off Grant Park to lots of people all summer long. All of it was done very quickly and without a lot of transparency under the previous mayor, so we hope Mayor Johnson will take a close look and maybe make a change.
And up next, more on today's explosive City Council meeting with our Spotlight Politics team. But first, a look at the weather.
As we heard earlier, tempers and emotions flared at today's City Council meeting, beginning with the public comments. Here to break it all down for us is our Spotlight Politics team. Of course, joining us is the full crew, Amanda Vinicky, Paris Schutz, and Heather Sharon. So first, let's take a look again at that tense, emotional debate.
That's our
NASCAR building in South Shore. It was promised to us in 2014. Brandon, don't make us come for you. Mayor Johnson, do the right thing.
Where the hell did $112 million go? Show me the money.
I'm conflicted because in my heart, I know what's right. I know it's right to want to help other people, because as black people, that's what we do. But when the hell are y'all gonna help us?
Tense and emotional, like we said. Heather, in the end, the vote was 34-13, with 3 not voting. So was the bottom line sort of a yes and?
Yes, it absolutely was. There is a real desire on the City Council for Mayor Johnson to come up with a long-term plan to help these migrants start new lives either in Chicago or elsewhere, and we don't really know what that plan looks like. Mayor Johnson's only been in office for about 3 weeks. He says he's working on it, but there are real questions about now what happens after June 1st when this $51 million, which will be added to money from the federal and state governments, runs out. And then the question is, what then? And do migrants keep arriving from Texas every day? There are more questions than answers, and I think that is why today's debate was so fraught.
Paris, do we know, is it specific or specified where the money is going to be spent over these next couple of months?
As far as I understand, it's a stopgap. It's going to be able to fund some of these temporary shelters. It's going to go to get some of these 700 or so folks off of the floors of police stations and into shelters. But as Heather said, it's going to run out. None of it's going to go toward health care or anything. And by the way, most of these migrants do have to go to the doctor. They do have to have checkups. That's being paid for by the county. The county is looking for reimbursement from the state for that. The state is looking for some kind of cohesive plan, and everybody's looking for reimbursement from the federal government for all of this. So this is where those relationships with Congress people are going to come in handy. Mayor Johnson is no doubt going to have to talk to Chuy Garcia, Mike Quigley, and others to get some pressure on the Biden administration to get more resources.
Amanda, to that point, what funding will be coming for the migrants from the newly passed state budget, if any?
So as we just talked about, there is going to be some $42 million. That's not exclusively going to go to the city of Chicago, however. And really, that is a portion of what Mayor Johnson had asked for. There's a document that was being passed around members of the General Assembly with asks from the city that wanted more $200 million. So really, again, sort of a quarter almost, you could say, or more than that, but not enough, according to the city of Chicago, for what it needs. But you heard the speaker say, we have a lot of demands.
Do we know how much is coming for migrant health care, and is that going to be enough?
Well, so that's a separate issue. We talked a lot about this funding for undocumented residents. That is different than these asylum seekers who don't yet qualify for that. You need to have been a resident of the state for 5 years in order to really to qualify for that. So it is a totally separate issue, and one that is, as Paris noted, really going to put pressure on the Cook County health systems.
Heather, what is next to help the black community, and is that a budget priority? We just heard Alderwoman Taylor bring that up.
So Mayor Johnson has pledged to support efforts to increase revenue in the city, and he did so again today after the city council meeting. Again, he doubled down on the proposal known as Bring Chicago Home, which would raise the real estate transfer tax on properties worth more than $1 million to create a dedicated funding stream that would help homeless people, whether they grew up here or whether they arrived yesterday from Texas on a plane or a bus. So that is the next fight. The real fight will come as he starts to put together his 2024 budget. We will be beginning to get a look at sort of where the city's finances change at the end of July, perhaps, and then he will have to craft a plan that he says begins to address the decades of disinvestment and the decades of disparities that led to so much of the anger and frustration we heard today on the floor of the City Council.
And Heather, briefly before we let you go, Memorial Day weekend, most violent in Chicago since 2015. Mayor releasing a statement addressing it yesterday. But what did he and his interim police superintendent have to say today, their first, press conference post-holiday?
Well, Mayor Johnson said that the violence again was intolerable and that he was committed to addressing those disparities that he said caused that violence, poverty, generational despair. And then Superintendent Fred Waller, who's the interim top cop, said that he would deploy the police department in a more nimble way to address emerging threats or emerging circumstances. And he said that while some Chicago police officers won't like that, that's just what he's going to have to do. Late tonight, a response from the Fraternal Order of Police saying they do not want to see officers' days off canceled this summer as they were last summer to deal with another spike in crime.
Of course. Okay, Heather Sharon there at City Hall for us. Paris Schutz, Amanda Vinicky, Spotlight Politics. Thanks as always, gang. Back to wrap things up right after this.
Where have we been? Where are we at? Where are we going?
Essentially to be able to help anyone and everyone in the community, whether that's through academic support, social emotional learning, or just providing a safe space for youth to be able to be there.
This is the fabric of the neighborhood. You need to take care of the neighborhood. It's an ecosystem.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
Please join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. A treasured community hub in Edgewater could soon become a respite center for migrants. We have a live report.
And tracking down illegal early morning trash pickups. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and enjoy this wonderful evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to recognize its 18 attorneys selected for the 2023 Super Lawyers List.